Hello, everyone. Do you remember how a few weeks ago Netanyahu was quoting the Bible about, I think it was the book of Malach, and how you are supposed to go and kill women, children, oxen, just about everyone? I thought at that point, does the Bible really say that? Because I couldn't figure out how God could order you to go and kill everyone, the guilty as well as the innocent. Then I remembered that when I was a child, we actually had the subject, we called it sacred history. And it was Genesis and Exodus and so on. And I often wondered why we called it history, even though it was with the prefix sacred, but history. And then I think I realize now that there is a difference between history and religion. And there are two different things. And they're both there in the Bible. And so anyway, this started, I started thinking about this, about justice and revenge, or justice, the difficulty here with justice and just retribution, justice and vengeance. And instead of going to the Bible, I went to a classical Greek plays, in this case mythology and plays, and there is the great tragic writer from, and because this is about the same time as the Bible, perhaps even a little bit earlier. You're talking here about the 6th and 7th, 6th centuries BC. Okay, and do you see Aeschylus The Oresteian Trilogy? I'm going to tell you what this book is about. It's 3 books. Okay, one is called Agamemnon. The other one is the Libation Bearers. That's the second book. And the third is the Eumenides, which is the Furies. Okay, I'll explain. In the first book, he's going to deal with this issue, and I'll explain how. In the first book, Agamemnon, he's a king, and he goes to war, and he stays away for 10 years. All right, his wife takes a lover. He sends 2 of her 3 children away. She's not a very good mother. She just sort of does away with them. And she takes this lover. He becomes king, and they live happily ever after, as it were, or they hope anyway. But what happens is that 10 years after, Agamemnon the king comes back, and they have a problem. And so between the 2 of them, they agree that they're going to kill him. And they kill him, as the book said, by treachery. Agamemnon, the text says, is taking a bath, washing away the pains of war, and she probably gives him what he thinks is a towel or something like that. Okay, but she throws it on him and wraps him up in this cloth and kills him. All right. So they continue living together. Her lover is king, and nothing happens. Except that many years later, her son, Orestes, learns of this and comes back from the city of Argos to Athens to avenge his father's death, or assassination, or killing. And he had he's sure that that is what he has to do. He went to the oracle in Delphi and Apollo there. The prophecy was that, yes, it was his duty to avenge the death of his father. So he was right to do so. And that's the second book. In the third book, he's going to go to trial for the murder of his mother. And the persons accusing him are the Furies. And I'm going to take you to the courtroom. The judge is the goddess Athena, or Athene herself. And this is a story, the subject matter is so near to the core of human feeling, to the central experiences of life, that you will find yourself, as you are reading the story, as you know the story, what the author says, you'll find yourself thinking about all kinds of things, not about necessarily the plot, but it's so well written that you have no choice. What is happening today is going to come to mind, as well as philosophy, theology, ethics, all kinds of things. You cannot avoid it. It is called the Oresteian Trilogy, okay, and it is by Aeschylus. And these his works have been given a place among the greatest achievements of the human mind, because it does reflect the experience, the beliefs, the aspirations of a society, of a vital society. Now, let me set it for you. In the 800 years between the fall of Troy and the rise of Athens, Greek social and political life went through many changes. Each city and island, for the most part, maintained its independence. Sometimes one city or group was more powerful, sometimes another. There were periods of prosperity and peace, which actually reduced the need to have a unified command in the hands of a king. And so power gradually transferred from the king to the nobles, and then eventually from the nobles, the aristocracy, to the rich merchants, businesses, okay, who had risen by trade from the ranks of the peasants. All right. Now, by the 7th and 6th centuries BC, okay, all this is happening BC, the merchants of outstanding ability, or perhaps just good luck, established themselves as the rulers of many cities, and they were called tyrants. And these tyrants, these business people, okay, tended to, instead of looking after the interest of the local population of their own city, actually pay tribute to the powerful empire, which at that time was Persia, who was, calling the shots, which that huge and very powerful empire actually guaranteed their position of power. So they were answerable to an outside empire rather than to their own people. And finally, about the end of the 16th century BC, a great movement for freedom resulted in the expulsion of most of the Greek tyrants and the establishment of democratic institutions. Now, the place of Aeschylus were written within some 30 years after the Battle of Marathon, while the new Athenian democracy was bursting into new life. All right, so he himself had grown among the different tyrannies, the revolutions and wars, but now they, the people themselves, were called upon to govern, to judge, and to legislate. So the new moral responsibility of the ordinary citizen was fully accepted and was deeply felt and taken seriously by the citizens themselves. No important decision, no important burden was delegated either to the aristocrats, the old aristocrats, or to officials. The citizens themselves decided in person, by a majority vote, all the judicial and political questions. So, because of that, one thing was always on their minds: what is justice? What is the relationship between justice and vengeance, which had always been there, yes? Can justice be reconciled with the demands of the old religions, with the force of human feelings, with destiny and fate so important? So you see, their old religion, from the period before the god Zeus, the deliverer, the god of gods, before he became god, and the other Olympian gods, was in its origin probably a worship of the dead, and therefore concerned with placating the powers that live under the earth. The earth itself has naturally always been thought of as female, and other female deities were worshipped as well, among them the Fates and the Furies. Their worship was generally associated with fear and mourning and shame. And while the new religion now coming up, the Olympian rites, the new religions were sort of more, let's say, more mainly joyful in character. So this new religion, with Zeus at the top, is described as a theomachy, or the battle of the gods. Okay, and in this battle, Zeus won. Now, pre-Olympian religion would roughly equate justice with vengeance, and the Furies were there to see that vengeance took place, whether by human or divine action. Okay, so the function of the Furies was to punish three major sins: blasphemy against the gods, treachery to a host or a guest, and the shedding of kindred blood, one of your relatives. The blood thing extremely important. From very early times, these sins were seen as they were felt as if they threatened the basis of human society, and therefore they would curse the whole community that allowed them, that condoned them. So the Furies hounded sinners away from their homes, and so actually performed an essential, as it were, service. And for this they were honored as the kindly ones, though the name certainly represented a wish to appease them as well as a wish to honor them. But Aeschylus is going to show that their principles, because the old religion was given way to different ways of understanding, so he's going to show that their principles are inconsistent and really unsatisfactory. Because although they will punish, for example, a son who does not avenge his father, and punish equally a son who kills his mother, they nevertheless will ignore the guilt of a wife who kills her husband. Why? That was not considered such a sin. Why? Because he was not of her blood relation. And so as Apollo, you will see in the story, I'm going to tell you the story, this is just a preamble to sort of tell you what is going on. Apollo will point out that actually this is inconsistent because it shows contempt for the marriage bond. It also shows that the Furies act solely by a blind rule of thumb and are incapable of dealing properly with the special case of Orestes. Now, who is Orestes? Orestes is Agamemnon's son, the one who's going to avenge his father and kill his mother because his mother killed his father. Okay, so, but more than this, as far as the Furies are concerned, you see, there is an inconsistency also because a single murder, if what you do to atone it is to avenge it, this will necessarily lead to a continuous feud and an endless series of murders in successive generations, you see. So I'm going to avenge this, then someone else will avenge that. It will never end. In other words, the old religion, the author is telling us, is no safe moral guide in urgent situations that involved life and death. So the quest for justice is not satisfied here in the old religion. So things are changing slowly, and now we have Apollo, who is the god of the oracle of Delphi, yeah? And now Apollo moves the scales forward a little bit. His moral sanctions seem a little bit more appropriate when he speaks through the oracle. For many hundreds of years, since before Zeus, the cities and individuals from every part of Greece, when faced with problems, difficult problems, moral or political, had been sent to consult this oracle. And the college of priests who administer it had gained a unique position, a very position of influence in the whole Greek world, so that in a quarrel between states, the support of Delphi might actually prove decisive. You know, in the Hebrew law, for example, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, okay, which is sometimes misinterpreted as being avenging or revenge, which of course is not. Is about the retribution has to be proportional. In other words, if I steal a chicken from you, it's not right for you to burn my house down. Perhaps you should steal my chicken. In other words, it has to be appropriate. Yes. So that was meant, and we have it also in Greece, that was meant to impose a limit on indiscriminate vengeance of primitive savagery. So the Delphic code interpreted the taking of life by a relative to be avenged, but then, in order to stop the continuous avenging, then offered to purify the avenger, as it were, by ritual cleaning and cleansing and mortification and so on. And so in that way to avoid further murders and an endless feud. Okay, but this principle, though, is better than, the blind function the Furies had, is still unsatisfactory. Acting on this principle, Apollo himself had instructed Orestes to kill his mother, an act which Orestes himself actually was not very comfortable with. He wanted to avenge his father, but to kill his mother actually produced abhorrence as deeply as anyone who hears of it. So we are going to go now, therefore, to the court trial. Athene is the goddess of justice presiding. Okay, so just to remind you, the first book, Agamemnon, is dominated by the relentlessness of fate and destiny. The second book, about Orestes, by the command of Apollo, he kills his mother. And this third book that I'm going to talk about is called the Eumenides, which is another word for Furies. Okay, and presents the true justice of Athene, the goddess Athena, expressed in the authority and wisdom or gentle persuasion, the author calls it, of an established court of law, which was the Athenian Areopagus. Areopagus because it was in the hill of Ares. Okay, and so in bringing on to the stage this ancient Athenian institution as a body founded by Athene herself for the purpose of trying Orestes on a charge of murder, Aeschylus achieves two things here. There is something flying. First, he brings what we might call very generally the Athenian way of life as an ultimate solution of the deepest moral problems, which he's trying. He's dealing with a lot of problems. It might not be sufficient, obviously, to say the mores of the culture is not sufficient, obviously, to say what is right and what is wrong. The Athenian way of life or the mores of one particular city might change from year to year or decade to decade. But what he's trying to do is to contrast this to the primitive ideas of the old religion of vengeance and the inadequate compromise of the Delphic code. So he's trying to find a way, and he thinks he finds it in having the law, a court of law by which everyone agrees, and that law is eternal, perpetual, and so okay. He's doing his best. Remember that this is a play. It's going to be played to the populace, okay? So he cannot engage in highfalutin moral philosophical abstractions. He has to tell a story. He's trying his best. Okay, so Okay, so the old religion dealing with fate, well, that doesn't, in the society now, that didn't do it anymore. The Delphic oracle, well, going to the oracle, it seemed already a little bit tenuous. He's trying to find something else. He's a playwright. So he is also, I said that he's dealing with a lot of problems because it's not only moral issues that he's dealing with, but also with the burning political issue of the day. You see, for the last 130 years, the Areopagus, as I said, is called like that because they met at the hill of Ares. The Areopagus had held a dominant position in the political life of Athens. Its powers over every aspect of community life were considerable. And its members, the members of this court, as it were life members, and so in practice tended to become at times too conservative and not to keep up with the times, they felt, or rather perhaps even reactionary, inflexible. Therefore, the Athenian assembly had decided to shake off this hurdle of this court. They saw it as a hurdle to progress. Let us say that. So, for years, in 462 BC, before the writing of these three books, the Oresteia, this Areopagus had been deprived of all its powers, except that of jurisdiction in cases of homicide. All their powers that they had had for so long, they were stripped away from their power. And this had brought about very, very intense feelings among both the supporters and the opponents. Now, the position of this court was guarded by strong religious sanctions, and the Eumenides, the Furies, whose function it was, their function was closely connected with the judicial powers of this court, and actually had an immemorial shrine in a cavern at the foot of the same hill. And so they represented, the Furies, the guardianship of the old gods. And the members of this court were recruited from the wealthiest Athenian classes, from the aristocracy. And so what you now had was that, as it happens so often, that the propertied aristocracy found themselves allied, because their powers had been now curtailed, found themselves allied with the old-fashioned country folk in indignation at this radical dispossessing of their, let us say, of their House of Lords, as it were. Okay, so a democratic leader carried the reform and was actually murdered because of this reform. And people never knew who it was that murdered him exactly. Perhaps someone mad, a long gun. A long gun, they always come in handy, And this is also what Aeschylus is trying to address. In other words, multiple issues. But an important one, that what he's trying to say is that the Areopagus, from its foundation, was not a political executive. It didn't have this function. It should be a judicial court. talking about separation of powers here. So he, the author, is with the reformers. Okay, so that is the background. So let us now go to the court and be there at the hearing. Okay, so let me remind you before we go in that up to now, in the first and second books, the whole story had been concerned with actions, with human actions, with human fate, with human feelings, and so on. And all the events had been shown as the working out of divine moral principles. Zeus is in heaven, judging sin and forgetting nothing, like in the Old Testament. Apollo is in his temple, from where he commands Orestes to act as the instrument of retribution. She killed your father, you must kill her. And now man is at the limit of despair and suffering, and now it is time for the gods to appear and to speak. And so the first scene shows the front of Apollo's temple at Delphi. It is early morning, and the priestess is about to enter, and she invokes all the gods, the old as well as the new, who have held this shrine from the earliest ages. And then she passes through the doorway, and a moment later the solemn silence in the temple is broken by her terrified cries, and she staggers out, hardly able to tell what she has seen. Inside the temple there is a blood-stained murderer crouching by the altar, asking forgiveness, and all around him, all asleep though, are the Furies, which were horrendous-looking creatures. All right, that is what she sees. And she considers this a pollution, is the translation, a pollution of the sacred shrine. And now we are going to see in the scene two more figures. Besides Orestes and the Furies, there is also Apollo, the god himself, and Hermes, the god of journeys. And Apollo speaks, and he is comforting and encouraging Orestes, and sends him with Hermes as his escort to seek final judgment and deliverance in Athens, at the court there. And he says to him, and I'm quoting now from the book, although, not all of it obviously, but in bits and pieces. He says to Orestes, this is Apollo, keep your courage firm. Go to Athens, city of Pallas. Pallas is another word for Athene or Athena. And there, with suppliant hands, embrace her ancient image, implore her help. There I will set you judges, and with soothing pleas, I, who first bade you to take your mother's life, will bring from all your painful days final deliverance. Let no fear conquer your steadfast heart. So he goes, and the Furies are left alone there. They were actually wanting to catch him in order to make him suffer and torment him. That was their job. But they fell asleep, and they're still sleeping. And then another figure appears, and it is a ghost, and it is the ghost of the mother, Clytemnestra, I can hardly pronounce it, okay? The mother. She tries to wake them up, reproaching them that they're not doing their job. She says, wake, wake. Oh, will you still sleep? Since you so slight me, I am abused unceasingly among the other dead, and wander about despised and shamed. In other words, her death has not been avenged yet. By them all I am held guilty and condemned, while for the blow that my own son struck me, no angry voice protests. See here, look at this wound under my heart. Say whose sword it was. Look at my wound. For though daylight cannot see beyond the flesh, she says, the mind in sleep has eyes. Will you not wake? Does grief not touch you? He has gone, he has escaped. And as they all wake up, she vanishes. And they realize that Orestes, whom they have been guarding, is no longer there. He escaped, and their prey is gone. What has happened? Furies, says the leader, we are foiled. Who were ever mocked as we have been? Who would bear such mockery as this? Then Apollo comes and kicks them out of his temple too. He comes out with his bow and quiver and says, out of this temple, quit my prophetic sanctuary. What place have you within these walls? Go to where you belong, some pit for punishments where heads are severed, eyes torn out, throats cut, manhood unmanned, a hell of maiming, mutilations, stoning, where bodies impaled on stakes melt the mute air with groans. That is where you belong. Your place is there. Such are the feasts you love, for which heaven loathes you. No more rubbing off your foulness in this house of prayer and prophecy. Away! Graze other fields, you flock unshepherded. No God loves such as you. He also tells them, however, that Orestes has gone to court for a trial, and he is to be tried by Athene herself in Athens, and bids them to go to the court too, and state their case, your case, their case, before her. And the leader says to him, now is my turn to speak. You, Lord Apollo, you alone are answerable. What was done was your doing. How's that? Inform me, please. You bade him take his mother's life. My oracle bade him to avenge his father. With his hand still red, he found you his protector. I commanded him to fly for refuge to this temple. The Furies say, we are here as his appointed escort. Why revile us? We hound matricides to exile. Do you indeed? And when a wife kills her husband, what of her? That's not the same. They are not kin. Therefore, such kindred blood is not spilt. Then you annul and dishonor the marriage bond. You are unjust to persecute Orestes' life. His crime I know you take most grievously to heart, while for his mother's crime you show remarkable leniency. Pallas, that's Athene herself, will hear this case and judge our pleas. and the chorus, well, it's the chorus, but it's the Furies. They will say a lot, it's kind of long, but we will trace him by his mother's blood, hound him to earth, and sue for justice on him. He's my suppliant, and I will save him if I can, and I will stand by him. So now the scene changes again, and now you see Orestes clinging for sanctuary to an altar in Athena's temple in Athens. He kneels before the statue and says, "Divine Athene, at Apollo's word I come. Receive me graciously, though still a fugitive, not unclean now. Long wanderings through tribes and towns have cleansed my blood-stained hand, blunted the edge of guilt. Now my long journey over land and sea is fulfilled. Goddess, I approach your house, your holy effigy. Here I'll stay to know the issue of my trial." And while he's praying, the Furies come, they drag him to the temple. The leader says, "This is his trail, I have it clear. Come, follow," where the silent finger of pollution points the way. Still by the scent we track him, as hounds track a deer wounded and bleeding. As a shepherd, step by step, searches a mountain, so have we searched every land, flown wingless over sea, swifter than sailing ships, always pursuing him till we gasp with weariness. Now he is here, I know, crouched in some hiding place. The scent of mortal murder laughs in my nostrils. Look here, see him at last. Watch every doorway, lest the murderer steal away and escape unpunished. Once again he has found protection. A mother's blood spilt, none can restore again. So they arrive and find him and recite also an ode, as it were, about their purpose, which is obviously punishment, and while at the same time Orestes is saying to the goddess, "Long taught by pain, learned in cleansing ritual, I know when speech is lawful and when to hold my tongue, and in this case a wise instructor bade me speak. The blood upon my hand is drowsed and quenched, the stain of matricide washed clean, and now from holy lips with pure words I invoke Athene, ruler of this country, to my aid." And the leader of the Furies comes and says, "Neither Apollo nor Athene can have power to save you. Lost, cast off, the very taste of joy forgotten forever, you will live the prey of vampire powers, a pale ghost. We hold our judgment just and true. The man whose open hands are pure, our anger shall not pursue, and he lives untroubled and secure. But when a sinner, such as you, burdened with blood so foully shed, covers his guilty hands for shame, then, bearing witnesses for the dead, we at his judgment stand to claim the price of blood and yieldingly." And also at the same time they repeat a spellbinding song to secure the victim, and they repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. It's like, spell, a curse. something like, now by the altar over the victim, ripe for our ritual, sing this enchantment, a song without music, a sword in the senses, a storm in the heart, and a fire in the brain, a clamor of furies to paralyze reason, a tune full of terror, a drought in the soul. This is total torment to someone's conscience. And then they say something else, and the it's like a continuous refrain. It's very powerful, actually, even in translation. Our chosen path, they say, is torment. Right, so this is going on, and now Athene herself enters the courtroom. And she says, "From far away I heard my name loudly invoked. This strange company I see here in my precincts moves me not indeed to fear, but to amazement. Who are you? I speak to all of you. This man who claps my statue as suppliant, and you, being like none I know that earth can bring forth, either of those seen among gods and goddesses, nor yet are you like mortals." They were horrific looking. But she says, "I'm being unjust. Reason forbids slandering others unprovoked." They say, "Daughter of Zeus, you shall hear all we have to say, and briefly told. We are the children of the primeval night. We bear the name of curses in our home deep under the earth." "Your race I know, also your names in common speech," says Athena. "Maybe," they said, "and next you shall hear our office." "Willingly, if you would speak plain words." Plain words there will be. "We drive out murderers." And Athena says, "Where could such a fugitive find rest and peace? How? Only where joy and comfort are not current coin. And to such end your hue and cry pursues this man here? Yes, he chose to become his mother's murderer. Was there not some compulsive power whose wrath he feared? And who has power to goad a man to matricide?" All right, one plea is now presented. Two are to be heard, says Athena. "But he would ask no oath from us, nor swear himself." Athena said, "You seek the form of justice more than to be just." "How so? Instruct me. You do not lack subtlety." "Injustice must not win the verdict by mere oaths. Then try him fairly and give judgment on the facts." "You grant me the final decision in this case," says Athena. "We do. We trust your wisdom and your father's name." "It is now your turn to speak, my friend," he says to Orestes. "What will you say? Your faith in justice sent you to my statue here, a holy suppliant, at my hearth. Therefore, tell first your country, birth, and history. Then answer to this charge, and let your speech be plain." Orestes says, "O divine Athene, first from your last words I will set one great doubt at rest. My hand is not unclean anymore. I do not sit polluted at your statue's foot, and I will tell you weighty evidence of this. To a blood-guilty man, the law forbids all speech till blood drops from some suckling beast are cast on him by one whose office is to purge from homicide. Long since, these rituals were all performed for me in other temples. Beasts were slain, pure water poured. That question, then, I thus dispose of. For my birth, I am of Argos, and you know my father well, for you and him joined league to make the city of Troy no city. Agamemnon, leader of that warlike fleet. When he came home, he met a shameful death, murdered by my black-hearted mother, with a cunning snare which first hid, then proclaimed the bloody act that felled my father as he washed away the stains of war. When later, after many years of exile, I came home, I killed my mother. I will not deny it, in just retribution for my father whom I loved. For this Apollo equally is answerable. He told me of the tortures that would tear my soul apart if I neglected vengeance on the murderers. Whether or not I acted rightly is for you to judge. I will accept your word for life or death. Athene says, this is too grave a cause for any one man to judge. Nor is it in the case of murder that I should, by my own judgment, let the wrath of justice loosened. The less so, since you came after full cleansing rites as a pure suppliant to my temple, and since I and Athens grant you sanctuary and welcome you. But your accusers' claims are not to be dismissed, and should they fail to win their case, their anger will fall like death and terror, blight and poison on my land of Athens. Hence my dilemma, to accept them or to banish them, and either course is peril and perplexity. Then, since decision fall to me, I will choose out jurors of homicide for a perpetual court in whom I vest my judgment. Bring your evidence, call witnesses whose oaths shall strengthen justice's hand. I'll pick my wisest citizens and bring them here, sworn to give sentence with integrity and truth. The Furies says that they're talking, and they say, for fear enforcing goodness must somewhere reign enthroned, and watch men's ways, and teach them through self-inflicted sorrow that sin is not condoned. What man no longer nursing fear at his heart, what city once fear is cast away, will bow the knee to justice as in earlier times? They must be punished. Athena says, summon the city, herald, summon the city and proclaim the cause. And while the council chamber fills, let citizens and jurors all in silence recognize this court, which I ordain today in perpetuity. That is the rule of law, okay? That now and always justice may be well discerned. So, The 12 Athenian elders arrive in the court. The court is solemnly constituted, and the pleading begins. Apollo comes from the temple, leading Orestes inside the courtroom. The Furies say, "Divine Apollo, handle what belongs to you. Tell us, what right have you to meddle in this case?" Apollo says, "I came to answer that in evidence. This man has my protection by the law of suppliants. I cleansed him from this murder. I am here to be his advocate, since I am answerable for the stroke that killed his mother. Pallas, Athene, introduce the case, please, and so conduct it as your wisdom prompts." Athena says, "The case is open." To the leader of the chorus of the Furies, he says, "Since you are the accuser, speak first. The court must first hear a full statement of the charge." The Fury says, "Though we are many, few words will suffice." And then to Orestes he says, "And you answer our questions point by point. First, did you kill your mother?" "Yes, I did. I cannot deny it." "Good. I think we've won the first round." "It is too soon for you to boast. I am not yet beaten." "You must tell us nonetheless how you dispatched her." "With a sword I pierce her heart." "On whose persuasion, whose advice?" "Apollo's. His witness that his oracle commanded me." The god of prophecy commanded matricide? "Yes, and he has not failed me from that day to this." "If today's vote condemns you, you will change your words." "No, I trust him. My dead father too will send me help." "Indeed. So you trust the dead now, do you? Your own hand struck your mother dead." "She was twice guilty, twice condemned." "How so?" "She killed my father and she disowned me too. I was made an orphan. Twice the crime." "She was twice guilty, twice condemned." "How so? Instruct the court." "She killed her husband and my father too." "Yes, but her death absolved her, and you are very much still alive." "But why was she not punished by you while she lived?" "The man she killed was not of her own blood." "But I am of my mother's." "Oh, you vile wretch! Did she not nourish you in her own womb? Do you disown your mother's blood, which is your own?" So, the leader of the Furies is questioning Orestes to establish the fact that he killed his mother at Apollo's command. Orestes now, it seems that he is a little bit at a loss, and so he calls on Apollo to conduct the case for him. In other words, it is apparent now, you see, to the audience that this problem is too hard for human solution. Now we need the gods. So Orestes says to Apollo, Apollo, please now you give evidence. Make plain to me it was right to kill her. That I struck the blow is true, I own that. But was murder justified? Expound on this point and show me how to plead my cause. Okay, so I'm going to read what he says. Apollo, to you, august court of Athene. In other words, Your Honor, if it may please the court, okay, here I am, okay, here I come. I will speak justly and truly, as befits a prophet God. I never yet from my oracular seat pronounce for man, woman, or city any word which Zeus, the Olympian father, had not formally prescribed. I bid you then mark first the force of justice here, but next, even more, regard my father's will. No oath can have more force than Zeus, whose name has sanctioned it. The Furies say, then Zeus, you say, was author of this oracle that you gave Orestes, that his mother's claim should count for nothing till he had avenged his father's death? Zeus so ordained, and Zeus was right, for their two deaths are in no way to be compared. He was a king, wielding an honored scepter by divine command. A woman killed him. Such death might be honorable in battle, dealt by an arrow from an Amazon's bow. But you shall hear, Pallas, and you who judge this case, how Clytemnestra killed her husband. When he came home from the war, for the most part successful, and performed his ritual cleansing, she stood by his side. The ritual ended, as he left the silver bath, she threw on him a robe's interminable folds, wrapped, fettered him in an embroidered gown, and struck. Such, jurors, was the grim end of this king, whose look was majesty, whose word commanded men and fleets. Such was his wife who killed him, such that none of you who sit to try Orestes here hears her crime unmoved. Okay. Now, you see, up to now, the ugliness of the Furies, because they were horrid, their blind unreason and ferocity, probably disposed the audience against them. And Orestes' case at first seems strong, but Apollo is now going to make 4 speeches. I won't read them to you, I'll just summarize them. 4 speeches, in each of which, impressive though they might seem at first, he shows how inadequate they are. First, he says that his oracles are not his, but come directly from Zeus. Well, to begin with, this implies an appeal to authority rather than to reason, which is what the author is trying to get us to. An approach that might not please the audience too much. Then, this is all during the first speech, then Apollo invites the jurors to regard the will of Zeus as weightier than the oath they have taken to judge according to their best understanding. a suggestion that might arouse mistrust. Then he claims the authority of Zeus for all of his oracles, both personal and political. Now, the problem here was that Delphi was notoriously pro-Persian at the time of the Persian invasion. And if Apollo can make a mistake in politics, why not in morals? So there's a doubt here. So that was the first speech. He's not doing too well at the moment. Then, in his second speech, he says that Agamemnon's death was not to be compared to that of the mother, Clytemnestra, because Agamemnon was a man and a king, and his wife killed by treachery. But this doesn't do the job either, because Apollo had commanded Orestes too to kill his mother by means of treachery. And he completely ignores, in any case, the added horror of attached to matricide. Yeah. In the third speech, this one is even weaker, because he's talking about the finality of murder, which plays into the Furies' hands. For the murder of a woman is as final as the death of a man. So that doesn't go too far. Then lastly, he puts on a truly far-fetched theory of parenthood, that the mother is not really the true parent of the child. She is, he says, the nurse who tends to the growth of the seed, and so on. Well, okay, they didn't know about what is it, the hormones or whatever it is. Okay, so I see what he's saying. He's saying that the seed comes from the man, and the woman, as he understood it at that time, was a sort of a, to make it grow, to like a little oven, I guess. You're right. So okay, so okay, they didn't know, but I mean, he could have guessed that without the woman, the man's seed, without the ovum, the egg, the man's seed is not going to get very far. Okay, but okay, let's anyway. But that was his part of his defense. And then he goes from bad to worse, because at the very end he ends with the promise of many gifts to make the city of Athens great, if they pronounce him not guilty. And this, which is an open bribe to the Athenian court, should finally do away, nevertheless, with any doubt that in fact the writer wanted very much to present Apollo's argument as unsatisfactory. So the chorus leaders, the Furies, with a single sentence, bidding the judges reference to their oaths to judge according to that is what they're doing, for them to judge, the jurors to judge according to their consciences, rather than in fear of the will of Zeus, as interpreted by Apollo, who didn't do a very good job. So Athena then announces the perpetual constitution of the court of Areopagus, of the court of justice. And this is what she says. Citizens of Athens, as you now try this first case of bloodshed, Hear the constitution of your court. From this day forward, this judicial council shall for Aegeus' race hear every trial of homicide. Here shall be their perpetual seat on Ares' hill. She goes on a little bit. Here day and night shall awe and fear aw's brother check my citizens from all misdoing, while they keep my laws unchanged. If you befoul a shining spring with an impure and muddy dribble, you will come in vain to drink. So do not taint pure laws for the sake of expediency. Guard well and reverence that form of government which will eschew alike license and slavery, and from your polity do not wholly banish fear. For what man living freed from fear will still be just? Hold fast such upright fear of the law's sanctity, and you will have a bulwark of your city's strength. I here establish you a court inviolable, holy and quick to anger, keeping faithful watch that men may sleep in peace. Okay, so the case goes on, the case is over, and now the jurors have to pronounce the sentence. And during the following dialogue, the jurors rise and turn to vote. And the way they vote is that each one has two pebbles, as it were, one black and one white. There are two urns. One is operative, that is where they're going to put the white for acquittal, or the black stone pebble for guilty. Okay, and each one has one of each. So they cast their vote into one urn, and then they put the other, the one that they're not using, into the unoperative urn. Okay, so inoperative, yes. Each juror has two pebbles, a black and a white. Into the operative urn, each drops a white pebble for acquittal or a black one for condemnation, then disposes of the other pebble in the other urn and returns to his seat. Okay. And the Furies say, I too advise you, do not act in scorn of us. Okay, so while they're doing that, Athene tells both the Furies and Orestes and Apollo that should the votes be equal, she says, her casting vote, which will be the decisive one, will be given in favor of Orestes. That is the decisive vote. Okay, and this is exactly what happens. The jurors, the votes were even in number, and so Athene casts the decisive vote for not guilty, as it were. Again, the author is telling us here that the case is too hard for human decision. Matricide is a fearful crime against which must be set both the divine command and the long period of suffering and ritual cleansing that Orestes has already undergone. So Athene's vote comes into effect, and Orestes, with the solemn pledge of eternal friendship between his country of Argos and Athens, leaves the court a free man. it remains for Athene now to calm the Furies, the resentment and the threats of the Furies, who tell her that they're going to bring all kinds of plagues and pestilence to Athens. She insists that the trial has been fair. The even votes means that the Furies should feel neither defeated nor disgraced, and she offers them a position in Athens that will assure them of everlasting honor and usefulness. They will continue to count. And finally, after long conversations, they relent and they accept and pronounce blessings instead of curses. And so violence is avoided, and holy persuasion, reason and wisdom, the civilizing instrument of the new age, wins the day. Okay, so that is the story. What was the problem with the Furies and fate and vengeance in that sort of way? Is that, you see, it was too automatic. This crime, this punishment. It was almost automatic. In other words, they looked at the outcome, at the act itself, without taking into account people's intention. You know, Aristotle dealt with this too when he said, for example, well, he wasn't talking about cars, he was talking about oxen crossing the road, whatever, but I mean in today's terms, if you're driving along a road and you're driving well and reasonably and you know, doing all the right thing responsibly, and suddenly a child comes and crosses the street after a ball or something. Anyway, you couldn't stop it. You were doing all the right things, but you couldn't stop it because you have no control over physics and inertia. Okay, so you hurt him or you kill him or whatever. Okay, so Aristotle asked, in order to bring this point, you know, are you responsible for that action? The answer is yes, because it was you drove the car, you were driving the car, it wasn't anybody else, it was you. So yes, you are responsible. The second question is more important. Were you to blame? No. That is why, you know, we have these differences now between murder and manslaughter and so on and so forth. Okay. So, but there is something else here, you see. For example, when you only look at the outcome of the action, you may actually punish people with different intentions the same. You may actually be committing a great injustice. For example, imagine that I go to the bank and I ask for this. Well, before the banks were run by computers. This is just an example. Imagine that I ask for an amount of money and they give it to me, and I do not intend to pay it. In fact, I've already got my airplane ticket to go somewhere else, to another country, and I never intend to come back. So what I did was deceive, yes, to cheat and so on. Okay. I never intended to pay it back. Now imagine that you go to the bank and they give you the money, okay, and you fully intend to pay it back. You would give an arm and a leg to pay it back if you weren't able to. But something happens, a hurricane blows your house, your children, whatever it is, and you can't make the payment that month on your credit card, whatever. Okay, now, should these two people be punished the same way? The first one never intended to pay. You would give an arm and a leg to pay it. You just simply can't at the moment. But you see, you're punished the same way. It goes to the credit score thing. Now we are run by algorithms and computers who do not understand intentions. And so you are punished exactly the same way. Credit score didn't pay this month, and so on, exactly the same. My goodness, in other words, this is the 5th century BC. And now, 7,000 years later, we are going back with these algorithms, we're going back to the Furies. 7,000 years ago, that did not take into account all those considerations that a man may have when he does something wrong. It's not only the outcome. Yeah, we understand this in Christianity, that intention is essential, but we are now going back to the time of the Furies. I mean, science, so here we are with science at the point of extinction. Science, which was going to save us all from, in the 18th century, they thought that. And here we are with not extreme, but the great knowledge of science that we're almost killing each other with nuclear war. And we... with the Furies, judging us as the Furies did. Anyway, food for thought. So, that's it. Think about it. Okay. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.